Welcome to Volume 3 of my 10 top tips for Affinity Photo. If you find these tips useful, then please like and subscribe. First of all, we will create some text using the Artistic Text tool. Just drag out to get the size and then type something. Just a nice simple word, the first word that comes to mind really. I don't know why. Like so. And then we'll select the Move tool here so it turns it into an object which we can drag around and play with. Let's just center it a bit. With the text selected as an object, we can now change the font color of the whole word using the color picker. But the problem is, if we want to create an outline and set the color for that outline, there seems to be no controls for this up here. There are none. You have to go into View, like so, and then down to Studio, here, and then choose Character. And this will bring up the Character Attribute panel, which, as the name suggests, has a whole bunch of settings for your text. I'll just grab the panel and dock it over here, so it becomes a tab in the top area of the Affinity Photo control panel. So from now on, the Character panel will be available for me to use. All I'll have to do is just select the tab. With the Character panel active and the text object selected, I can now give it an outline. All I have to do is click here in the outline style and then give it a width, up the width, and there we are. We now have an outline. Then if I click here in outline color, I can set the color of the outline. Like so, and that is how we create a colored outline on our text. Here's a neat little feature of Affinity Photo. If you double click on a tab, like so, if I double click say on this Layers tab, it will shrink the whole section, like so, down to just the names and the tab controls. Just this one line here. And if you click on it once again, it will expand back out. So if I go down and double click on the Navigator tab here, it will shrink down below these controls into a single line at the bottom here. And then if we click on any of these tabs here, say 32p once, it will reappear. It's a really nice way of creating space. Because for instance, on a big project, you may find it handy to have more space for your layers. At the moment, I've got plenty of room because I've only got a single layer in the panel here. But what if I had a lot of layers? Let's have a look. What we'll do is just press Ctrl and J a few times to duplicate the image to give ourselves, say, 10 or so layers. And now I'm having to scroll up and down the layers because there are too many to display in the window here. If I double click on the Navigator tab, I can now see all of my layers. If I need more space, I can double click one of these tabs. Now I can see even more layers, and if I want to bring back, say, the histogram, just single click on it and back it comes. Cool! Here's a really nice little tip for the levels control. This image is a little washed out, so I'd like to use the levels control to add some contrast. So adjustments and levels. And I can add contrast with the levels tool by bringing up the blacks like so and bringing down the whites. If I want a little more control and I want to see what is happening with the blacks and the whites, all I have to do is hold down Alt on the PC or Option on the Mac whilst using the slider. So if we hold down Alt whilst moving the black slider, we can see where the black is clipping. Now, we may not mind some of the blacks clipping. In fact, a lot of the time it's fine. And I think for me, that amount of black clipping is absolutely okay. I'm getting pure black in the places where I want it to be pure black. The rest is fine. Now I can do the same with the whites. Hold Alt, bring down the white slider, and I can see where the whites are clipping. I have pure whites on these window areas, but I'm more interested in the rest of the scene and the cat. I'm not really bothered if the window areas here blow out. I just move it down, looking at the clipping until I think it's right. That's okay. And it also works with the output level here. If I wanted to, say, using the output controls, raise the black level to reduce the contrast on an image, or just lighten the blacks, I would raise the output black level like so, and that would be fine. But by holding down Alt or Command, I can see exactly how much my blacks are disappearing. I can visually, accurately set the black to the point that I like, and the same with the whites. I can now see exactly where the data starts or stops clipping. Excellent. I thought I'd show you my favourite method for output sharpening. It's the one I use all of the time. Here I have a nice image of a canal boat, which is sharpened for its current resolution, but now I'd like to resize and sharpen the image for screen viewing at 1080p. So the first thing to do is to resize, so let's select Document and Resize Document. So I'll type 1080 into the Y dimension. It's set on pixels, press return, and I automatically get 1919.7, which is fine. It should automatically round up. That's the resize. So next, output sharpening. What I use for output sharpening is the tone mapping persona. In the tone mapping persona, first I reduce the tone compression to 0, as it is 100 by default. Next I scroll right down to the detail refinement and click on it to open it up. This is a really nice method for sharpening. In my 5 ways to sharpen with Affinity photo video, I cover this. It's really good. And it's particularly good for output sharpening. If I press Ctrl and 1, it will render at 1 pixel to 1 pixel, and I will see it at the resolution it would be on a 1080p display. All I do is set my amount to about halfway to start with, and then bring up the radius until it's sharp enough. Now normally this would be about 10 to 15, but I'll do it to about 25 so that we can see the effect better on YouTube. Now if I just zoom in and bring down the radius and bring it back up, you should better see the sharpening effect. Then I'll bring my amount down really low and then bring it up until I think it's sharp enough. Now again, I'll do it a little bit more for YouTube. Normally I'd set around 10 to 15 for the radius and about 30 to 40 for the amount. I've set it higher so that hopefully you can see the effect here on YouTube. Okay, that's done, so I'll just click apply. And now I have a, well, in this case, slightly over sharpened, but I would normally have a really nicely sharpened document for screen use. And all I would do then is choose File and Export and output for JPEG or TIFF or whichever format I would like. And that is my preferred method for output sharpening with Affinity Photo. Now I'm going to show you a nice little tip for creating an even border around your image. Really handy if you want to create a frame for your image for printing. There are multiple ways to do this, but this is the one I like. First go to Document and Resize Canvas and select the center anchor point. These anchor points control the method that Affinity Photo uses to resize the canvas. In this case, it will resize from the center, causing borders to appear around the outside of the image. If I chose the bottom right, it would resize from the bottom right and cause a border to appear on the top and the left. Next we choose our units. I'll use pixels in this case. You could use something like inches, but as I know that I want a 32 pixel border around this, I'm going to use pixels. Then click this little lock to stop the X and Y sizes from affecting each other. We don't want the X sizing the Y or the Y sizing the X. We want to be able to change them independently. First we'll go into the X, and for a 32 pixel border I'm going to have to add 64 pixels, 32 pixels either side. All I have to do is delete the PX and type plus 64 and press return. And exactly the same in the Y, delete the PX and type plus 64 and hit return. So that will add 64 pixels to the X and 64 pixels to the Y on the canvas, and remember it's scaling from the center, so it will create a border all around the image. And lastly, just hit resize and bingo, the image now has a 32 pixel border like so. And if we'd like to, we can easily add some colour into the border to create a nice coloured frame. All we do is go to Layer and New Fill Layer, then grab the layer and move it underneath the image. And there we go, we now have a nice frame, and we can change the colour of the frame in the colour selector like so. But I think I'd like mine to be white. And that's how you create a nice even border for your images in Affinity Photo. Here's a nice quick tip. Let's just select Adjustments and Brightness and Contrast. If you increase the brightness slider all the way to maximum, you may still find that the brightness is still not bright enough. Or if you're reducing the brightness, you may want it even darker. Or with the contrast, you may wish to have even less contrast, or even more contrast when it's high. The answer is really simple, just click the linear checkbox. This switches the mode to linear, which ranges from absolute minimum to absolute maximum. Without the linear checkbox being set, Affinity Photo imposes its own restraints. And with it set, you can increase the brightness all the way up to pure white, or all the way back down to pure black. And the same with the contrast, you can add much more contrast or remove the contrast completely to completely wash the image out. If I show you now, if I just take the brightness all the way to white and turn off the linear, you can see that it's not as bright. And that is a really easy way, a quick and easy way to expand the range of your brightness and contrast controller. Another handy little feature of Affinity Photo. Now you may find a time when you come to use the bilateral blur and it just won't work. The options are just greyed out like so. If I go to Filters and then Blur, you can see the bilateral and medium blur are greyed out. And you may think, what have I done? What's wrong? Well, there's probably nothing wrong with the image, and you've probably done nothing wrong. You've probably just run into a limitation of Affinity Photo. Your image is probably in 32-bit. If we look here, you can see RGBA 32 HDR. This is 32-bit. The bilateral and median blurs do not work in 32-bit, so the answer is to switch to 8 or 16-bit. So Documents, Convert Format / ICC Profile. In the Format drop-down, choose either RGB16 or RGB8. You could use the others, but for simplicity's sake, I'll just choose RGB16, which is a 16-bit bit depth. Select Convert, and now if we take a look, we're in RGBA 16-bit. So if we go to our filters and blur, there we go. Bilateral and median blurs are now enabled. Let's just select bilateral blur. First we'll set a nice big radius, like so, and then set our tolerance. I think about there. And if we zoom in to take a look, we can see that the flat areas are blurred and the detailed areas aren't. And that's how the bilateral blur works. Click Apply. We are able to perform this bilateral blur because the image is either 8 or 16-bit. In this tip, I'll show you how to add multiple layer effects to objects. Let's create a simple object from the Shapes list here. We'll select the Star tool I'll hold down Shift and drag out a nice star. I'll hold Shift to make sure that the star is equal in width and height. Then select my pen tool and center the star on the screen. Next, go to the fill and just select a nice green fill for the star. Now the next thing I want to do is to add a series of coloured borders, one after the other. Each border outside of the last border. Now I could add the first one using the stroke tool, but for the sake of this demonstration I'm going to add all of the borders using the layer effects. So just click on this little FX icon to bring up the layer effects panel and select outline. Make sure you select the lettering to bring up the outline controls. Set the radius, up the radius, I think about that will be fine. Then set the colour from the colour drop down like so. And that looks really nice, but now what if I want to add another outline to the star? Well, I can't as it stands. If I try to add another outline, well, there's only one outline. If I try to change this one, it just changes the one that's already there. There's an easy way to achieve this. Right click on your layer like so and then select rasterize. Then this little panel will come up and make sure you unset this. If you leave it set, it will leave the layer effects intact, which is what we're trying to avoid. What we're trying to do with this rasterize operation is to take the layer effect and to rasterize it, which will turn it into a bitmap as part of the original star. So click rasterize. Now the layer effect has been transformed into a bitmap and added to the star bitmap. The layer effect is now part of the star. And if we click on effects, we can see that we now have no outline effect. And now we can add another one, so click outline to bring up the parameters and click on the checkbox. Let's create another outline. Here we go, up with the radius and then select a new colour. I think a nice red one, ready orange, click close. And now I would like to add a nice fade to the outside of the red. That would look nice. So if I click effects again and then select outer glow, which will create a nice glow on the outside of the object, and increase the radius, as we can see we have nothing happening. Nothing I do will make the glow appear. But if we turn this outline off like so and then select a nice red, and then we can see we have our nice glow. But the problem is it's in the same place as our outline. The glow is actually being obscured by the outline. And that is not what we want at all. We want the outer glow to be on the outside of the outline. So get rid of the outer glow, click close, right click and rasterize. Make sure you uncheck preserve layer effects, click rasterize, click on effects, and as you can see all the effects have gone because they've been embedded, they've been rendered into the pixels of the image of the layer. So now we can go to our outer glow and select a colour, a nice red, and increase the radius. Bingo! And now we have an outer glow on the outside of the last outline that we applied. Okay, for a final touch we'll just rasterize the image, and that is how you apply multiple layer effects to an object. Here's a handy little tip. There are times when you want to make a layer semi-transparent so that you can see what's going on underneath. Normally you'd use the opacity slider like so, but there are nice quick keyboard shortcuts. All you have to do is press the numbers between 1 and 0 on your keyboard. So if I hit 1, the layer becomes 10% opaque or 90% transparent. And then if I hit say 5, it becomes 50% opaque, 9, 90% opaque, and 0 for 100% opaque or not transparent at all. This works on any type of layer, so if we create a nice little star with our shape tool, let's create a nice big star on the screen and then just center it to make it look nice. We could use the opacity slider, or we could use the quick keyboard tap of 5 for 50%, or if we want 10%, just press 1, or 80%, press 8, and 0 for fully opaque. And they are quick keyboard shortcuts for setting the layer opacity. Handy. In this tip, I'll show you how to use Skylum's Luminar as a plugin for Affinity Photo. The first thing you have to do is to tell Affinity Photo where the Luminar plugin lives. So we select Edit and Preferences, then select Photoshop Plugins. Make sure Allow Unknown Plugins to be used is selected. Now we need to add the Luminar directory to the plugin search folders. So it knows where the plugin lives, just click Add. Then navigate to the Luminar folder. Now I'm using Luminar 3, which resides in this PC, C, Program Files, Skylum and Luminar 3. Once you've navigated to the Luminar folder, just hit Select Folder. And there we have it, we've added the Luminar program folder to the plugin search folders. Affinity now knows where to find the plugin, so just hit Close. This panel just says that a restart is required, so just select Yes. Affinity Photo will then close itself down and restart. So let's take a look, go to the Filters tab and Plugins, Skylum Software, and there it is, Luminar 3. And of course it's greyed out at the moment because we don't have an image loaded. Okay, let's load an image. I'll go to Open Recent and I think Pretty Pooch. Okay, let's use Luminar 3 to make a few changes to the image. So first of all, Filters, Plugins, Skylum Software and Luminar 3. It only takes a couple of seconds to boot, and once we're in, like so, we can have a play. First of all, let's check out the Luminar looks. I think, looking through, I think that black and white would be nice. And if we go to the Filters panel, here we have our black and white conversion in the custom workspace. We could play around with this, or we could add some new filters. So let's add filter, and let's just choose Develop for now. Increase the exposure, increase the contrast, bring down the highlights, up the shadows, up the whites, and bring down the blacks. And once you've finished making changes to your image, all you do is hit Apply. Luminar will then export the image back to Affinity Photo. It just takes a couple of seconds to pop up, and there we have it. We have an image edited with Luminar 3 as a plugin from Affinity Photo.